As of the time you're watching this, it's been 5 years since we started posting regular content on our YouTube channel. And I want to, before I get into the video, I just want to thank everybody that follows along, subscribes, supports the channel, supports the shop, and everything that we do. So with that out of the way, what better or what more of a fitting way to do a 5-year video than to cover the drag car, which is the video that I started with, was the first video that I filmed with my phone, edited with my phone, and posted to YouTube. Yeah, we have older videos. The channel's a lot older than that, but in December of 2019, we posted the first real video to start to get the channel going.
I get questions from time to time about our Mark III. I figured before we tear it apart for a few more upgrades for next season, I'd go through, tell you a little bit of the history of the car, kind of break down the entire spec sheet of it, show you what it takes to build a sport front-wheel drive Volkswagen.
For those that seen that video, I'm pretty much, Clayton will probably put a clip of that in here. I'm pretty much just staring through your soul, super uncomfortable being on film. Or being videoed, I guess, not film exactly. But I'm still not very comfortable doing this.
All right, we're live.
Okay. Oh man, this is terrible.
So what?
You ready?
Yeah, recording.
Is Ben ready? Sure, he sure is. So we're, we gotta start over, man. Sakes. Brain dead.
As the guy started to the video in the channel. Oh, this is fucking hard, man. See what happens, Travis? He just can't talk. Do a set of oh my you can't do that, Travis. Jesus Christ. I will come over there and kick the car off the Jack's head. Sorry. I don't know what to say. Is now that this what the f? So let's just stop rolling. What am I doing?
Let's do it again, but better.
What are you laughing at? Fuck. I don't know how I can start that. I gotcha. We'll put this light down, take the gloves off, and get really into it. For fuck's sakes. What do I say at the end of the video? This is just fucking my brain, man. Is this gonna be an outtake? Until the next video. Why do I say until? Subscribe, go. Stop recording.
I've grown a little bit and have gotten a little bit more comfortable with it. However, there's many times that I do multiple takes. In this video, I'll probably have 300 takes to try to film something, to put together, to make a video out of this. Either way, it's time to get into the video. The old video was kind of hilarious for me to go back and watch. It just talks about the drag car. I've had a bunch of people asking questions about the car specifically, little things about it, and I kept replying back that we would do a full detailed video of everything involved with this thing. So this is going to be that. It's going to be a lot of me talking, but there's going to be a lot of B-roll, some older clips of running this car and running the old car. So with that said, this car specifically, for those that have been following along or are new to the channel, isn't the original car that we posted that original video with. Although it's a Mark III Golf or GTI, it is not the same one as the red one. This is a completely different chassis, and I will get into that in a minute. However, we're going to go through from top to bottom. The chassis, the engine, the ECU, the suspension, wheels, transmission, every single thing about this car. We're going to talk about it, so let's get to it. So first up is the actual chassis itself. This thing is I believe a 94 GTI. And to my knowledge, when we started doing this, and for those that have followed along, we did replace the roof skin on this. And to my knowledge, Mark III GTIs all came with sunroofs. My previous car was a Golf CL, and I wanted a no sunroof car, so I pulled the roof skin off of that car and we swapped it over to this one. So I do have all the paperwork and everything for this car, so technically I could register it and put it on the road. Obviously the hood exit exhaust, there'd be things specific to it that wouldn't be so much fun driving it on the street, but I do have everything to be able to do that. However, that's not the purpose of this car, obviously. It was built as a full dedicated drag car. The paint is Nardo gray, so for the Volkswagen fans, this would be an Audi color. On the interior of the car, that would be the original color to this chassis, although we did respray it. This is tornado red. Likes to be tornado pink in most applications because it sits outside forever. But that's it. It's a 94 GTI. Obviously, it's been resprayed. The other things in regards to the chassis itself, it does have a, I believe the company is West Design fiberglass front bumper and fenders. It does also have a fiberglass rear hatch as well. And then in regards to the glass, it is polycarbonate sides and rear. So all the sides are polycarbonate. It does still have a front glass windshield. If you notice, one thing I was very particular about with the polycarbonate glass is that some people go really, really thin and it buckles and looks super wavy. As you can see from this angle, it looks very straight. It almost looks like glass. You can see where we've kind of bolted in the rear windows. I didn't want it to look wavy. I wanted the car to look good and look appropriate. So that's just a fine little thing that we did with it. It does have obviously a Jetta front grille and headlights and hood. The hood is still steel, so that's not any lighter. I wish it was, but it is what it is. The bumper, the rear bumper, everything in the back is basically factory, although as mentioned, this is fiberglass. We did build this wing from scratch. It is essentially an air brake, so as I mean, I can set it up to whatever I want, but essentially when I get to the end of the track, this slams up and creates downforce on the back of the car because these cars are so light in the rear. When you pull the parachute, which is just a Stroud chute, the rear end can get very light, so a lot of guys have started to implement some sort of air brake in the back. We've built this thing from scratch. I just cut it all out on the plasma table, and so far from my bit of testing, I haven't had a whole lot of full passes down the track. It does seem like it's going to work great. However, that's yet to be determined 100%, but lots of guys have had success doing those similar style air brakes on these cars. It does have stock GTI taillights and stock Jetta headlights. However, the lights will work. They don't currently work right now. We don't have them wired, but I did pull the headlights apart and smoke the inside of them. I just wanted the front to look a little bit different than normal. So that's a couple of things in regards to the body. The doors are also steel doors. It has been gutted pretty extensively, as you can see. Even the back, all inside. We'll have lots of B-roll of this as I'm talking, but the back's all been gutted out. The spare tire well has been cut off or cut out. And then the cage itself is a 25.5 cert cage. The fire suppression that we have 2 nozzles spraying at me. There's 5 nozzles out in the engine bay. It has an aluminum Kirky seat with a 5-point race-equipped harness, and it has a lightweight steering wheel. We'll get to all the shifter and all that stuff. I'm just kind of trying to cover the chassis side of things. I guess I'll mention this. Everything on this car and everything that we're going to talk about with this car has been built in-house. The paint work was done next door to us, painted by my buddy Travis. All the fabrication, all the engine work, all the tuning, all the wiring, every single thing that you see here has been done with the exception of the roll cage. I have built quite a few roll cages, and for those that have been following along, they would have noticed that I did purchase a blue Mark III GTI that we were going to do a fully, funny car style cage, 25.5 serrated cage. However, with the amount of time I'm able to work on the car, knowing that I was putting a new engine in it, doing new ECU, new wiring, all that sort of stuff, I knew it was going to take a very, very long time for us to do the roll cage the way I wanted to. So this car popped up, this chassis, it already had the roll cage done in it, and we picked it up and then we've transformed it into what you see now. However, as mentioned, everything else on this car, with the exception of the roll cage, has been done here. All the fabrication, engine work, tuning, wiring, all that sort of stuff. We could have even built the roll cage. However, buying this chassis with the cage already done saved me probably a year's worth of time, because the amount of effort to go into building a cage like this takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, not to mention a lot of money. So I picked the car up as a rolling shell with the cage done. And again, I am repeating myself for some of this. For the guys that have been watching this channel for a while, you would have seen as we built this and have gone through all the things to get to this point, to running the car. But I wanted to do this video just to talk about all the ins and outs of it. So that pretty much covers the chassis side of things. The moldings and everything are still factory. Most of it, for the most part, aside from the front end, looks like a regular GTI. So now let's move on to maybe the suspension. So for the suspension, it has a set of Bilstein coilovers, front and rear. I can't remember exactly the spring rate for those guys wanting to build a car like this. This would be great information. I believe they're 800 pounds front and rear. The rears may be a little bit larger than that, maybe 1,000 pounds. I can't remember. I tried to find the data and I couldn't dig it out before this video. So they're very stiff. The car pretty much doesn't move. Like that's me standing on it, and as you can see, the car barely moves at all. So the coilovers, the rims and tires, I run a set of welds with bead locks. These are 13 by 10s in the front, and then there's a set of spin works in the rear that are 15 by 3, I believe is what they are, or 13 by 5, or sorry, 15 by 5. Either way, they're skinnies. They're on the back of this car. In regards to the rear beam, it has, we'll show a picture of basically what it looks like. It's a completely custom rear beam to be a lot lighter. So the stock rear beams in these cars are very heavy. We built a rear beam specifically for drag racing to get a bunch of the weight out of the back of it. It has stock Mark IV brakes in the rear and stock Mark III GTI brakes in the front. This was a VR6 GTI. It would have had originally, which we have all the stuff, 5-bolt stuff, control arms, spindles, and all that stuff were a VR. It's all switched over to 4-bolt because I already had the rims and tires from my previous car. We didn't want to switch any of that stuff. So that covers the suspension. It does have a set of camber plates in the front. So actually, I'll pop the hood here. So you can see it has a set of camber plates in the front. In the back, there's really no adjustment for camber in the rear. We do have a giant weight plate in the front of this car. I would say, I can't remember when we weighed it. I think we weighed it with all the stuff on it. I would say the weight plate alone is probably 200 pounds. This car weighs, with me in it, around 2460, ready to race, with my gear on, with all the fluids and everything in it. So it's 2250 or something like that. I weigh around 200 pounds. So a lot's been taken out of the car to make it light. However, the weight plate and all of the engine components, the size of the turbo, all that stuff adds a bunch of weight back into it. But class rules typically for what we're doing is 2,400 pounds with the driver. So we're very close to meeting that anyways. We can't be any lighter than 2,400 pounds. It also does, I guess in regards to suspension, it does have a set of traction bars that we built that go essentially from the control arms up to this front weight plate. and that prevents the control arms essentially moving. So we do have spherical bearings all in the control arms and the subframe and everything, so nothing can really move anyways now. Same with the rear. However, the traction bars are known to help, so we've had them in there since the beginning. So I've covered the exterior of the car, a bit of the interior in regards to the chassis. I've covered the paint, I've covered suspension. I think it's now time to kind of talk about the transmission. It's so hilarious as I film this because I have deleted so many outtakes just to make Clayton's life easier editing this. So as mentioned, even after 5 years, man, I still screw this up like so many times. The transmission, I don't know if I talked about it already because I screwed up. It is an O2J transmission, which would be typical out of a Mark IV 180. Yes, some of them, like the one on the dyno right now, came with an O2M transmission, but this is running an O2J. However, the only thing really stock about it is the case itself. It is running a 4-speed dog gear set in it, so none of the stock gearing is in it. The only thing I think left in regards to the internals of the transmission that would be stock, I think, is reverse gear. That's it. It is running a Pelican Pelican differential. The diff, the gear set, we do have pinion brace and a cuff on it as well to help support the transmission and keeping the gears together and help from breaking the case. Also, we run a slipper on the clutch. Oh, speaking about the clutch, currently it's a twin disc 725 Clutchmaster kit in this. We do run, as mentioned, a slipper. It's kind of like the Magnuson style slippers. However, we built our own. Again, there'll be lots of video content or lots of B-roll of those items. Also, in regards to the transmission, it has a Diesel Geek short shift kit on it. And we run, as many would know, we run a KDN Motorsports shifter in the car. We've run that since day one. It's my buddy Dave who runs that company. The shifters are amazing. We've been around with him dealing and developing this shifter, helping since day one. It has a 121 and 232 lockout built into it. We run also his KDN shifter cables as well. The thing shifts rock solid. It's amazing. Honestly, I've owned CAE shifters. I've owned a lot of different motorsport style shifters. The KDN shifter is really good. I'm not just saying that because Dave is my buddy. It is good, and there's a reason why we want to run a full lockout setup in the car. There's a lot of money invested into this thing, and money shifting it is not cheap to do, nor is it safe. So we do everything we can, invest a little bit more money into a shifter to protect everything else in case something goes wrong. Okay, and on to the engine. This one's going to be a little bit of a weird one for some people. It's essentially a 180 bottom end, so it uses a stock 06A block out of a Mark IV 180. However, I have converted it to run a 16 valve cylinder head. There's a couple reasons why I've done that. One is that I originally pulled this engine from my Rabbit. When I built that car years ago, I had a 16 valve in it at that time. Also, and I kind of wanted to stick with the 16 valve. The other reason I've stuck with the 16 valve is simply due to parts. The 20 valve head, obviously from the 180, has more moving parts. The valves are a little bit smaller. The cylinder heads ported versus ported, they're not that much difference in flow. But I do have less parts to deal with in the head itself. So when it comes time to fix stuff or buy a new or start building a new cylinder head, it's a little bit cheaper when there's a little less parts in the engine itself. The cylinder head was done by JD Portworks. You can hit him up on Instagram. I'll put his link here. And the power it makes, for those that have been following along, it made, the last time we had it on dyno, it made 1,030, something like that. That was at relatively low boost. I expect to push this thing to probably 55 pounds of boost and better fuel than what it is. It made 1,000, I think around 43, 44 pounds of boost. So we have some room to go with the engine. More about the engine itself. The bottom end is sleeved. So typically on a cast iron block, you don't really need to sleeve them. The Volkswagen blocks are very strong. However, when you're trying to make this kind of power and push it to the limits, we decided to sleeve the block. It is running a aluminum set of connecting rods, R&R aluminum connecting rods. It has a girdle in it. It has obviously race bearings. It's still running stock oil pump. In regards to the bottom end, there's a couple things also. It has a set of 82 millimeter custom JE pistons. It has, I mentioned the aluminum rods. It has a Forge FSI crank. It has billet main caps, billet main studs. It has ARP crank bolt. On the flywheel side, the crank has been drilled out for 11 holes in total. So it's 6 factory and then 5 additional holes. It's all ARP bolts to hold the flywheel onto the crank. Also in regards to the block, we're running 11 millimeter studs. They're 625 head studs. The block is essentially tapped out to run the 11 millimeter studs. It is running pretty standard equipment in regards to an integrated engineering adjustable timing sprocket. This actually would be from a 1AT. There's a hodgepodge of stuff that needs to happen to run a 16 valve head on a 1AT block. It's not too crazy. Most of the stuff in regards to this engine is 1AT related. The timing belt's a little bit different. I think that timing belt specifically for this combo is a 2JZ timing belt. So I think I covered most of the block. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anything. Aluminum rods, girdle, race bearings, all that stuff. It's sleeved. In regards to the cylinder head, it has 2 millimeter over intake valves, 1 millimeter over exhaust valves. It has a set of cat cams in it. And again, it was fully ported. It has titanium lifters and springs, all the average stuff in regards to running a lot of RPM and trying to make horsepower. And then in regards to stuff like the intake manifold and intercooler and stuff, this is all custom built for this application. It's a Skunk 2 plenum. The bottom part, the runners, all that stuff, I basically built myself. It did originally use a Nubworks flange. However, I modified that to death to run dual injectors per port. So we're running 8 injectors. I think in regards to fueling, we'll get to the fueling stuff in a minute. The intercooler core is a 1,000 horsepower Garrett core. The tubular manifold, up pipe, dump tube, all that, obviously all custom built for this setup, which we did years ago. The charge piping, again, all custom built, 3.5 inch charge piping. The turbo, this turbo specifically right now is a Pulsar 7375. I have a couple other turbos to try on this thing. We just didn't get to that point. Every time we got back from trying to make some passes down the track this year, we had things to rectify or fix or whatever. Again, it's a new chassis, so I was expecting to have problems, which we did, but we're getting through them. In regards to the wastegate, you kind of can't see it down there, but it is a TurboSmart E-gate, so it's electronically controlled wastegate. It's the first time that we've run one of those gates on any of the cars. Once I got it figured out, which didn't really take much, it has worked flawlessly. Boost control has been rock steady. It is a 50 mil gate, I believe, which is more than enough to control with the way that I have the gate priority and everything on the manifold. It's more than enough control to control boost in this application. The turbo, as mentioned, I have a few different options to try and run in this thing. I haven't decided where we'll land with it. I think there's more power to be had with better fuel on the current setup that we have, but as things go on, we probably will want to make more horsepower than what it currently is sitting at. So maybe we'll try another turbo. I don't know yet. In regards to fuel, we've run, what is it, 1 ethanol R, which is essentially a race E85. We are thinking about switching to some different fuels and trying some things because there is more power to be had with just some fuel changes. However, the car, we're still trying to sort it out, as the guys that have followed along seen our struggles over the summer. So we will probably push for more power eventually, but right now, if I can just get a pass down the track with even 800 horsepower, I'd be happy. The fuel cell, again, all built custom for the application. I put the fuel cell down on the passenger side. On the driver's side, we'll have the bumper off for all the B-roll and stuff, but the bumper, the battery is on the driver's side. It has a small radiator, as you can see. It's a CSF radiator and fan. All of the lines, everything, coolant, oil, all of that stuff is all braided line. We don't really have much vacuum line in the car because it's got an E-gate on it. So the only thing really that requires an actual vacuum line is the fuel pressure regulator, which I'll talk about that. It is a returned fuel system, so fuel comes in and then gets routed back down. You can see the bottom, and the ethanol content sensor is right in here to measure ethanol content. So when I store the car, stuff like that, we can run pump gas in it if I want, and the ECU will figure it out because that's what we got it tuned. Regarding the injectors themselves, I have a primary set of 1300 cc injectors, and then the big boy sets is a 2200 cc's. So we're running 3,500 cc's of injector per cylinder. It probably sounds crazy for a lot of 1AT guys building their turbo kits and wondering why I'm running such large injector setup in it, but it basically comes down to the fueling requirements. So the fuel that's used, whether it's ethanol or if we switch to methanol or some sort of combination, requires a lot more injector. That's why 3,600 cc's per cylinder. The fuel pump is I believe that's a 5 gallon per minute brushless aeromotive pump. We have -12 fuel lines from the tank to the pump, and then from the pump to the fuel rail is all -10 feed and return line. Again, moving a lot of power, or moving a lot of fuel, I should say, and because I've built a lot of turbo cars over the years, and the amount of fueling upgrades we've had to do for the same car over and over again as we push for more power, I just went kind of crazy with this fueling setup. Don't know if we'll ever max it out. I hope we never do, but that's one thing if I can recommend to people that are building their car, overfuel it. Biggest lines, biggest fuel pumps, biggest filters, everything you can do, because you're gonna want more horsepower, and buying all the same stuff, biggest injectors, buying all the same stuff over and over again gets very tiresome and very expensive. So the only thing we would potentially have to change in this is if we do start to run maybe straight M1 or something like that in it, we'll probably need a little bit more injector again, but we can just swap out one set of those injectors to get us where we need to be. I'll talk about some more random stuff. The motor mounts are all just solid steel. There's basically no motor mounts in it. It's just bolted essentially directly to the subframe and the chassis. So the front motor mount is just steel on steel. The rear brackets from the engine and transmission just bolt directly onto a steel mount that I had built. There is no brake booster in the car, as you can see. It's just a master, so the brakes are really stiff. In regards to some of the tuning stuff, as you can see there, that's for back pressure. We'll get to the tuning and ECU stuff in a second, but I think that covers most of the engine and everything that we've built. In regards to what's kind of stock in it, there's not a lot, but the block is still a cast block. Again, we did sleeve it. It does run the stock oil cooler. It does run stock alternator. It does run a stock manual tensioner in it for the timing belt setup. Regarding the ECU, The ECU is a Haltech Nexus R5. It is a complete ECU and PDM built all into one. So there are no, you'll see in the B-roll, there are no relays, there are no fuses, anything like that in this car. It is strictly wired directly from the ECU directly to the device in the engine bay. So the wires for the injectors, the coils, all that sort of stuff. The E-gate, it literally goes from the ECU, which you can see right up there, directly out to its device. It's made it amazing for the install and troubleshooting and all that sort of thing, because there's nothing in between. If there's a fault of any sort, the ECU will tell us, and really there's only two places to look. Unless something's broke along the way in the harness, it's either at the ECU or at the device. In regards to the harness, I'm probably say in regards in this video 100 times, but I gotta start somewhere. The harness was a flying lead Haltech harness that we basically pinned and terminated to all the sensors and everything that are in the engine setup. In regards to sensors, actually that's one thing. I don't think there's a single stock sensor left on this car. So except for the NOx sensors. There are still OEM NOx sensors on it. However, all the coolant pressure, oil pressure, temperature, everything, map sensors, all that cam signal, crank sensor, all of that stuff is completely different. We've switched it all out to basically be a little bit more reliable and a little bit easier to get if we happen to have a fault at a race event or something like that. Typically these sensors, well, we do keep lots of them, but they're more universal, so we can run a similar style sensor for coolant pressure, oil pressure, all that sort of stuff. So we just need to swap out a sensor that is more common. A lot of the sensors are dual purpose. So this is doing temperature and pressure. So we use this same dual purpose sensor for oil, coolant, fuel, stuff like that. Makes it easy also to be able to change them out because we're using the same sensor. It also cuts down on the amount of wires that we got to run. And then in regards to traction control, we have a rear wheel speed sensor. We have the speed sensor in the transmission, and we also have a speed sensor on the input shaft as well inside the transmission. Okay, what next? We've covered most everything. I didn't talk about the cluster. It is a Haltech IC7 dash. You can hear how loud that fuel pump is. So yeah, IC7 dash, and then we have their keypad as well. So I have a lot of buttons left to use, but again, we're still trying to work the car out, so lots of stuff will be added. All this stuff, I built it all, cut on the plasma, sprayed it with some wrinkle paint. The pedal cluster is all factory stuff with a Mark IV drive-by-wire throttle body. And actually, I didn't talk about that when we were talking about the engine stuff. We are using a drive-by-wire throttle body in this application. We ditched the cable. It was kind of a pain the way that the cable was run in my previous car, and we decided we wanted to try out a drive-by-wire throttle body in this case. And I'll go show you that. So yeah, we ran a 90mm drive-by-wire throttle body, and we have an HD clamp, a vibrant HD clamp on either side. So essentially the throttle body can float in one place. We did that to kind of keep the vibration out of the throttle body. Lots of guys in the motorsport industry have found that if you can isolate the throttle body a bit, it will give it a way better chance of doing its job properly without faulting out. We did have some faults at the beginning of the season, but I think it had to do with the car bogging so hard and almost cutting power. Since we started fixing that and being able to go a little bit better without the bogging, I've seen no throttle body issues at all. So I think initially it had to do with a power supply issue because the car was almost dying before it caught itself and got down the track. Some other little things I've noticed, kind of while walking around the car and talking about all the different things that we've done, and there's sensors on pretty much everything you can think of. I'm probably going to add a few more sensors, to be honest. The more data we can have out of the engine, the happier it will be, because I can log it and monitor it and set fail safes and stuff like that, and we can pick up on any troubles or anything, hopefully, before they happen. The engines in these cars are kind of disposable, to be honest. It sounds kind of crazy to go through all this effort, make this kind of power, but for anybody that watches, you know, sport front wheel drive drag racing knows that these engines get pushed to their absolute limit and failure is bound to happen. So with that, I already have another whole engine package being built. Well, we got the block and the crank and everything set aside. I'm just waiting on a couple of little parts before we get the machine work done on it. But I think I've covered most everything on this thing. Hopefully I have anyways. The venting for the catch can, it's just a catch can I built inside the car. We just did it to keep the catch can from being able to overfill in the engine bay and potentially go underneath the tires, stuff like that. So this catch can itself can pretty much hold everything that the engine has in it in regards to oil. This is just a vent that goes to the back of the car. Oh, also I run CO2. That CO2 is for the, what's it for? The wing. So that controls the wing, which I have programmed through right now through the brake pedal. So after I get over a certain speed, if I touch the brakes, the rear wing gets activated. Some other things back inside the car, parachute handle and staging brake. So that's a Wilwood staging brake. For those that don't know, that's essentially to hold the car when you go to launch it. So it's kind of like your e-brake in a drifting application, but it's there just to hold the car when you're trying to put preload on the engine and transmission, well, more so the transmission, for when you go to launch it. And I think that covers most of what this car entails. I did just notice I have some side skirts on there that I built just out of some bent aluminum. It's nothing special. And the mirrors were deleted as well. Again, just some plastic that we put on there to delete the mirrors. Hood struts, keep the hood up, and keep the Volkswagen, or old Mark IIIs had a hood prop that went up to hold the hood, so we just got rid of that and use hood struts, so that keeps that out of the way. The rad support, that's all custom built. You'll see all the footage of that with the front bumper off. And with that, the front bumper and the front weight plate is designed to come off very quickly and very easily. The front weight plate is, and you'll see in the footage, is designed so that the intercooler, the fuel system, the radiator, it's getting late. The fuel system, the radiator, the intercooler, everything comes out with the fuel cell itself. Everything comes out with the plate. So if we need to do an engine swap, I can have all of the things in front of the engine out with the plate in a very, very short amount of time. It's designed to be fixed and repaired and to do so very easily. The more you got to work on this thing and the more time it takes, the less interested in you are to fix it. So if you're building a car like this, be sure to take that stuff into consideration, because if something breaks, which is it's inevitable, it's going to happen, if it takes you way more time than it should to fix, you're not going to want to do it. So if you think it out ahead of time and build it appropriately, it won't be a pain when something does fail. For those that are still with me at this point in the video, I really appreciate you guys watching. I've tried to do the best I could to cover as much as I can in regards to the engine, transmission, chassis, and stuff like that. Again, we get these questions all the time, so I wanted to do this video for one, to have something to send people to, because repeating myself on the internet all the time gets annoying, and two, since this was kind of the video that started us posting regular content on YouTube, it was time to kind of redo it. It's a new car. It's got a whole bunch of different stuff with it, so I wanted to cover that. One thing that I just noticed sitting here is saying that I was going to forget stuff. I see there's EGT sensors in here. Yes, I run EGT sensors. Again, I try to run as many sensors as I can to try to keep this thing safe. Where we go next with this. So where do we go next with this thing, and what are the goals? I built the car originally to run 850s. However, the class that we built this car for at World Cup Finals has been basically deleted from the program. There is some talk about potentially trying to bring something like that back. However, the X front-wheel drive class that everybody's kind of been combined into is going faster than I kind of intended to go with this chassis. Now, this chassis, the cage, and the power plant and everything has the potential to do it. However, I have a lot to learn in regards to tuning and keeping the thing together and getting it down the track before I could ever consider going that fast. Those guys now, for the most part, you need to run basically a high 7 or a very low 8 or 8.0 pass in order to compete in that class. Again, not what I originally intended for this car. I have thought about trying to push it further. However, we still have a lot to learn. We have a lot to do with this thing to try to get it down the track consistently. Like our old chassis, we did very well with that on very minimal horsepower. So to start our season with this car being all new, we obviously had big hopes, but I was a realist also, and knew that we would suffer some headaches, and we did. Part of it is a learning curve for me with the new ECU and all that stuff and the strategies and having more weight bias up front. There's a whole bunch of things that go into getting these cars down the track consistently, and we're still working out those headaches with this thing. I'm almost done the video, I promise, and it's taken me probably 50 attempts to finish this last part. So the car was built for mid-8s. However, the way this sport is going for the front-wheel drive cars, it's constantly getting faster. Guys are figuring out ways to go faster, make more horsepower, stuff like that. So who knows where we'll end up with it. The goal, obviously, is to go fast, but we also want to be consistent. We want to go to events, win some rounds, have some fun doing so. So with that, this car, as you see it, I'm not very good at looking in the camera and looking at the car. Myself, Robbie, and Clayton have basically done everything you can possibly think of when it comes to building this car. As mentioned, the cage itself wasn't done. I picked the chassis up like this. However, the three of us, or specifically Clayton and I, really have built a lot of roll cages together, so it was no problem doing so. But the three of us are the ones that have put all the time and effort into building this thing. We all each have our own kind of strong points. Robbie does a lot of the wiring. I share a little bit of that as well. Clayton does a lot of fabrication, mechanical stuff. Robbie does mechanical stuff. I do the tuning. So it's a great combination, and I can't thank Robbie and Clayton enough for all the effort that's put into building this car and maintaining it at the track, and when we get back from the event when something's broken. Like right now, something's wrong with the clutch. I don't know what happened to it. Potentially the gear set. I also wanted to thank a few people that I deal with in the US and have for a very long time, which have been going fast in front-wheel drive Volkswagens for way longer than myself. But if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have this car at the level I do. Kevin Black, James Castellano, Todd Pavix, and Ricardo Tolle. Those guys have been a huge help to me over the years, and I really appreciate it. Again, this is a very unique application, building a front-wheel drive Volkswagen. We're definitely an outcast when it comes to your typical sport front-wheel drive car. It's basically overwhelming Hondas, a sea of Hondas, and the few odd car outside of that. However, we stuck with it. We built probably one of the nicest looking Mark IIIs out there. I love the color combo. And me saying that a Mark III looks nice is something, because I think these things are typically hideous. I would never own one probably in a regular form. However, the reason I built the Mark III at the beginning was because I didn't like them and I had no problem cutting them up. And we definitely cut this one up and my old one up. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. I did this one by myself because I did the original one by myself. It was so cringeworthy. It's kind of funny to look back on it now, how far we've come with YouTube. We have lots of cool stuff in the works. We have the Mark IV 1AT on the dyno now. We did some runs with that today. The all-wheel drive swapped Mark V, big turbo, just every single option you can imagine. That car is probably within maybe a week away from running, starting for the first time. And also, so we got 1AT content here. We got 2-liter Gen 1, Gen 2 TSI content here. Both of those are expected to make big power. And then also we have my daily, GoPro camera in the way, which was a Mark VI Golf R. Essentially, it is a Mark VI GTI that did an all-wheel drive conversion on with full R everything. However, as you can see, the engine's out. We're starting the 07K 2.5 turbo swap in this thing. You'll see a whole bunch of that stuff and a whole bunch of other stuff. Thank you everybody for the support. I'm done rambling. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.